I'm not afraid of Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle is a third-rate greaser and bully. I'm used to first-rate bullies. So she doesn't frighten me in the slightest. And if she tried anything unprecise, I'd crush her the way an elephant crushes an ant.
Here is the strange thing about the Lady Colin Campbell rumor. On its own, it was thin. There was no named woman, no date, no screenshot, no document, no witness willing to stand behind it. Lady Colin Campbell alleged that Meghan Markle discovered messages on Harry's phone involving another woman, and Closer France reported that unverified claim in July of 2026. That was it. A public figure made an allegation, offered no receipts, and by the ordinary rules of the tabloid ecosystem, it should have burned out fast, the way 100 vague royal rumors have burned out before. Instead, a few weeks later, the story was bigger than ever. Not because anyone proved anything, because of the reported fightback. On the 9th of August, Dan Wootton reproduced wording attributed to New Idea Australia, and that reproduction is where a nothing rumor suddenly grew teeth. The wording said there was no truth to Lady Colin Campbell's claims, and that Harry and Meghan remained united. Fine. That is the sort of line a couple might want out there. But then came the unnamed source, and the unnamed source did not calm anything down. Quoted in that report, the insider claimed Harry was fed up, that Meghan was ready to fight back, that Harry was reminding her legal action is not usually the royal way, and that Meghan had wanted to shut Lady C down years ago.
So, I'm not at all intimidated by her or by him. And all I can say is, if they think that they have an action that they can bring against me, bring it on. I'll see them in a court of law.
The reproduction went further still, adding alleged tension over timing, over royal reconciliation, and over legal costs. Read that again and notice what happened. A rumor that had no specifics was answered with a flood of specifics. A story about one vague allegation became a story about a couple who are fed up, divided on strategy, arguing over money, and wrestling with when and how to hit back. That is not a smaller story, that is a second story, and it is far more damaging than the first. So the obvious question sits right on the surface. Why this one? Public figures ignore rumors every single day. Most nonsense dies from lack of attention, because attention is the only fuel these stories run on. A denial, even an anonymous one, is a form of attention. It tells the algorithm the subject cares. It tells every other outlet the topic is live. And a denial that comes bundled with tension, strategy disputes, and money talk does not close a door. It builds 3 new ones and props them all open. That is the contradiction that makes the whole thing worth examining. The reported fightback did not shrink the rumor, it fed it. And once you see that, you cannot unsee the pattern behind it, because this is not the first time private matters have been turned into public content by the very people who say they want to be left alone. There is a cleaner comparison sitting right next to this, and it exposes the whole game. Because when the Sussexes genuinely want to shut something down, they know exactly how to do it, and it looks nothing like an anonymous whisper to an Australian magazine.
First of all, Meghan Markle can't sue me for anything because I've never said anything about her that was untrue or defamatory or unfair or that somehow wasn't pegged in her own conduct. So right there, she doesn't have a leg to stand on.
Go back to late July of 2026. The Daily Beast quoted a Sussex spokesperson directly, on the record, condemning remarks by Mark Dolan as deeply distasteful, extraordinary, and irresponsible, and saying the Sussexes were genuinely disgusted. That is what a real response looks like, a named spokesperson, attributable language, zero ambiguity about who is speaking and on whose behalf, no mystery insider, no drama about internal disagreement, just a clean, forceful official statement that leaves no room to wriggle. Now put that side by side with the Lady C situation. One rumor gets a spokesperson with a name and a title, speaking plainly, drawing a hard line. The other, arguably a far more damaging rumor, gets an anonymous source in a reproduced magazine article, offering reassurance so tangled it introduces new problems with every sentence. Why the difference? The couple can issue attributable responses whenever they choose. They have done it. They did it that same summer. So the choice to go anonymous around the infidelity claim is not an accident of circumstance. It is a choice, and choices reveal priorities.
As for Harry, I've said nothing defamatory about him either. He can't sue me either. Also, it's amazing that after 7 years with Harry, Meghan still doesn't know how to behave in the approximation of ladylike behavior. And she's still that rather greasy little chancer that she always was.
Here is where the defenders usually jump in. They will say nobody is obligated to answer every piece of gossip, and that is true. There is no duty to respond to Lady Colin Campbell or anyone else. If the Sussexes had said absolutely nothing, that would have been defensible, even smart. Silence starves a rumor. Silence is the one move the tabloid machine cannot metabolize, because there is nothing to quote, nothing to escalate, nothing to build a follow-up on. But that is not what happened. The issue was never whether they owed anyone a response. The issue is selection. When Mark Dolan crossed a line, the response was direct, named, and controlled. When a far uglier rumor started circulating, the reported response was murky, anonymous, and stuffed with fresh drama. One approach kills a story, the other keeps it breathing. And if you have already shown you can pick up the phone and put your spokesperson's name behind a statement, then reaching instead for an unnamed insider who spills internal tension is not caution. It is a different objective entirely. Think about what an attributable denial around the Lady C claim would have looked like. A named spokesperson, one sentence, flat and final. The allegation is false and defamatory, and that is the end of it. No talk of who is fed up, no hint of who wants to sue and who does not. No mention of reconciliation timing or legal bills. Clean, boring, story over. That option was available. It was used weeks earlier on a different matter. It was not used here. So what actually determines when commentary gets ignored and when the machine gets switched on? On this evidence, it is not the severity of the claim, because the infidelity rumor is more serious than a broadcaster's distasteful remark. It is not a principled refusal to engage with gossip, because they did engage, just anonymously and messily. What is left is the shape of the story each response produces. The Dolan response produced a full stop. The Lady C response, as reported, produced a cliffhanger. And a cliffhanger is exactly what the tabloids want.
Prince Harry, a certain mystery female friend in Montecito, and also a missing engagement ring.
Give them a united front described through disagreement, and they will run with the disagreement every time. That is the part that turns a denial into a gift. Which brings us to the reassurance itself, because once you actually take it apart, it stops looking like a shield and starts looking like a loaded story handed straight to the people it was supposedly meant to disarm. Look at the internal logic of the reported reassurance, because it collapses the moment you press on it.
Meghan has not been wearing her engagement ring for some time. But Meghan has been giving this message is something that most people have ignored. Meghan is very calculated and deliberate, and everything she does is carefully thought out to somehow convey some message.
The message is supposed to be that the couple are united, and the rumor is false. That is the headline. But watch how that unity gets described. Through disagreement, the unnamed source, quoted in that reproduced report, says Harry is fed up while Meghan is ready to fight back. That is not one position. That is two people wanting different things. Harry is reportedly urging restraint, reminding her that legal action is not usually the royal way, while Meghan reportedly wanted to shut Lady C down years ago and is itching to move now. You cannot describe a united front by narrating an argument about tactics. A united front does not need a referee. Then there is the claim of refusal to engage. The whole posture is meant to signal that the couple are above this, that they will not dignify the rumor, except the reassurance is drenched in engagement. It is not silence. It is a detailed insider account of how much they care, how fed up they are, how they are weighing their options, how they have wanted to act for years. That is the opposite of refusing to engage. That is engagement dressed up in the costume of detachment. And then comes the real backfire, the part that makes this concrete. A story that was supposed to contain one rumor instead delivers a whole bundle of new ones. Before this reassurance, the public had a single unverified claim from Lady Colin Campbell and nothing more. After it, according to the reproduced wording, the public also has alleged tension between the couple, alleged strategic disagreement over legal action, an alleged history of Meghan wanting to strike years ago, alleged questions about royal reconciliation, and alleged worry over legal costs. Count them. The denial introduced more storylines than the accusation ever did. So the honest question is not whether this was a denial. The honest question is whether it was a denial at all, or a fresh set of rumors wearing a denial's clothes, because a denial subtracts. It removes oxygen. This edition did the reverse. It multiplied the angles a journalist could chase. Every one of those new threads is a headline waiting to be written. Are Harry and Meghan fighting over how to respond? Is Meghan overruling Harry? Are they short of money for lawyers? Is a royal reconciliation on or off?
Harry may not have the resources to fight another court battle now.
None of those questions existed in the public conversation before the reassurance. All of them exist now. That is what makes the Fightback the story, not the affair claim, which remains unproven and unsupported. The reported response is what supplied specificity and conflict to something that previously had neither. Lady Colin Campbell gave the world a vague accusation. The reassurance, as reproduced, gave the world a plot. And here is the cruelest irony of the construction. The reassurance tries to project control. Look how calm we are. Look how united. Look how above it all. But the content betrays exactly the opposite. You do not leak your internal strategic disagreements to a magazine if you are in control of the narrative. You do not let an anonymous source describe your marriage as a site of tactical friction if the goal is to look serene. Every detail meant to reassure instead reveals a couple, or someone claiming to speak for them, who cannot stop feeding the very fire they say is bothering them. That distinction matters. The wording comes through Dan Wootton's reproduction of the New Idea report, not through an official Sussex statement or independent evidence supporting the underlying rumor. But the reproduced account still became part of the public story, and what it shows is a reassurance that argues against itself in nearly every line. Which leaves one claim inside that bundle that deserves special scrutiny, because it does not just contradict the reassurance. It contradicts Harry's entire public history. Take that one line and hold it up to the light. The reported reassurance has Harry reminding Meghan that legal action is not usually the royal way. Legal action is not the royal way. From Harry, of all people. That is the claim that should stop anyone reading it cold, because Harry's public record is one long argument that legal action is precisely his way. The Associated Press reported that in July of 2026, Harry lost his final case against the publisher of the Daily Mail, and he did not accept it quietly. He publicly called the ruling a complete and obvious whitewash. That is not the language of a man who avoids the courts on principle. That is the language of a man so committed to litigation that he attacks the judgment when it goes against him. AP also records that this was not a one-off. Harry won a case against Mirror Group newspapers in 2023. He extracted an apology and a settlement from the publisher of The Sun in 2025. This is a man who has made suing the British press a defining project of his adult life. So how does a claim survive that Harry is the voice of restraint, gently reminding his wife that the royals do not do lawsuits? It does not survive. It falls apart on contact with the public record. If anything, the caricature should run the other way. Harry is the litigator in that marriage. Harry is the one who has taken the tabloids to court again and again, who has framed those fights as a moral mission, who has publicly torched a ruling he disliked. The idea that he would be the brake pedal on legal action, that he would be the one counseling patients while Meghan strains at the leash, is almost comic given everything on the record. And this matters, because it tells you something about the reassurance itself. Either the source does not know Harry at all, which undercuts the claim of insider access, or the source knows him perfectly well and the line was chosen anyway to make the couple sound measured and traditional. Both readings are damaging. An insider who gets Harry's most famous trait backwards is not much of an insider, and the knowing choice to paint Harry as legally cautious, against years of headlines to the contrary, is spin so clumsy it insults anyone who has followed the story. Why would anyone reaching to defend the Sussexes pick an argument that Harry's own history so completely defeats? Because the line was not written to withstand scrutiny. It was written to signal a mood, restraint, dignity, the royal way. It borrows the language of the institution the couple walked away from, dressing a marriage rumor in the robes of old-fashioned royal reserve. But the borrowed robes do not fit, because the man in question has spent years doing the exact opposite in the most public forums available. Strip away the individual court wins and losses, and one sharp contradiction remains. The reassurance leans on the notion that Harry avoids legal battles as a matter of temperament and tradition. The public record, as reported by AP, shows a man who reaches for lawsuits reflexively and defends them loudly even in defeat. When a supposedly insider reassurance is built on a foundation that the subject's own biography demolishes, that reassurance is not evidence of anything except a story trying too hard. And once you notice that the reassurance is willing to bend Harry's litigation history to fit a mood, you have to ask what else is being bent, including the very idea that marriage rumors are somehow beneath a direct response, because Harry himself has already blown that idea apart. Because here is the thing about the suggestion, implicit in all of this, that marriage speculation is too undignified to answer directly. Harry answered it directly. on camera, with his own name attached, and he did it barely 2 years ago. Vanity Fair reported on his appearance at the New York Times Deal Book Summit in December of 2024, where Harry joked about the recurring divorce rumors by saying the couple had apparently divorced, in his words, maybe 10-12 times. That is a direct, named, public response to marriage speculation. No anonymous source, no reproduced magazine wording, no insider describing his feelings from the shadows, just Harry, in front of an audience taking the rumor head-on and laughing it off. So the notion that speculation about the marriage is categorically beneath a response does not hold, because Harry has already shown the opposite. When he wanted to swat down the divorce chatter, he did it himself, in public, with humor, and it worked. A light joke from the man at the center of the rumor deflates the story far more effectively than a tangle of anonymous claims ever could. When Harry laughs and says they have divorced a dozen times, the absurdity does the work. The rumor looks small next to his ease with it. Compare that to the Lady C response. Same category of rumor, broadly speaking. Speculation about the state of the marriage, but this time, no Harry at the microphone, no joke, no name on the reassurance at all. Instead, murky insider warfare, leaked tensions, strategic disagreements, and reassurance so convoluted it created new questions. The contrast is impossible to ignore. One approach was direct, human, and effective. The other was anonymous, messy, and self-defeating. Why the switch? If a named, humorous answer diffused marriage speculation once, why reach for the exact opposite the next time? A direct response from Harry would have been devastatingly simple. He could have made a dry remark and let the absurdity carry it, and the affair rumor would have shriveled the way the divorce rumor did at Dealbook. He has the tool. He has used the tool. He knows it works. And yet, on the more serious of the two rumors, the reported response was the murky one. Now, the Dealbook joke does not prove anything about the current state of the marriage, one way or the other, and it should not be read as evidence for or against the Lady C claim. That is not the point. The point is about method. It is about what the couple, or those speaking around them, choose to do when a marriage rumor appears. Once, they chose sunlight. Harry stood up and made a joke. This time, as reported, they chose fog. And fog is exactly what a rumor needs to keep growing, because fog can hide anything, and the mind fills fog with the worst it can imagine. That is the pattern taking shape. When the couple want a story dead, they know how. A named spokesperson. A direct joke from Harry. Clean, final, effective. When the story instead keeps spreading, look at what the response actually did. And the deeper you go into their history, the clearer it becomes that this selectiveness is not new. It runs right through how they have handled the line between private and public from the very beginning. Because the real fault line here is not privacy versus exposure. It is who gets to control the switch. And on the evidence, the switch has been flipped in whichever direction serves the moment. Consider Spare. The Associated Press described the extensive private family material Harry disclosed in his memoir, and there was a lot of it. Conversations, conflicts, wounds, the sort of intimate family detail most people would guard for life. Harry defended putting it all out there by arguing that silence does not make things better. Hold on to that phrase because it matters. Silence does not make things better. That was his stated philosophy when disclosure suited his purpose. He deliberately moved private family conflict into public media, monetized it, and framed the exposure as a moral necessity. Now set that beside the demand for privacy around the marriage. When it comes to a book, silence is the enemy and speaking out is brave. When it comes to a rumor they would rather not face directly, the preference tilts toward anonymous fog and complaints about intrusion. The principle bends to the moment, and that is the through line. Privacy is not being defended as a consistent value. It is being deployed as a media instrument, switched on and off depending on which setting produces the more favorable story. The pattern predates the memoir. Back in March of 2021, CBS News reported that Gayle King said she had spoken with Harry and Meghan, and relayed that Harry's conversations with Prince William and King Charles had not been productive. Sit with that. Private family conversations, the kind that happened behind closed doors between a man and his brother and his father, were translated almost immediately into public messaging through a named television figure. Whatever was said in those private talks, the assessment of them reached the airwaves fast. That is not the behavior of people protecting a sealed private world. That is the behavior of people managing a public narrative, using private moments as the raw material. And then there is the Beyoncé text. Vanity Fair described how, in the Netflix documentary, Meghan read aloud a private message she said Beyoncé had sent her, and the exchange appeared in the series. A private text from one of the most famous women alive. Read out and broadcast as entertainment content in a streaming production the couple were paid to make. Whatever else that is, it is not the instinct of someone who treats private correspondence as sacred. It is the instinct of someone who sees private correspondence as material, useful when it flatters the story being told. String these together and the picture is unmistakable. A memoir full of private family pain, defended as necessary, private royal conversations relayed to television within days, a private celebrity text performed for a documentary audience. This is not a couple who have been silent guardians of their inner life, forced against their will into the spotlight. This is a couple who have repeatedly chosen to convert private material into public content whenever that content served them. Which is exactly why the privacy complaint lands so awkwardly now. Nobody sensible argues they have no right to a private life. Everyone has that right, including them. The point is narrower and sharper. You cannot spend years turning selected private moments into books, broadcasts, and streaming content, and then expect the world to accept, without a raised eyebrow, that private boundaries are sacred only when the story is one you would rather not tell. The tabloid machine they complain about is a machine they have fed, on their own terms, again and again, and a machine that has been fed does not politely stop when the meal becomes inconvenient. The media treatment early on was genuinely brutal, and some of it crossed lines that should never have been crossed. That history is real, and it deserves to be said plainly, but the response to being burned by the press has not been to starve it. It has been to keep supplying it, then act surprised when the cycle continues. You do not get to be among the most available former royals in modern memory, and simultaneously claim the mantle of people who just want to be left alone. The two positions cannot share a room, and the reported reassurance around the Lady C rumor is that contradiction in miniature, a demand to be left in peace, delivered through a leak that hands the press a week of fresh copy. So where does all this actually land? Strip away the noise and there are two clean ways to read the reported reassurance, and both of them arrive at the same destinations. Scenario 1. Suppose the anonymous reassurance genuinely reflects Sussex thinking. Suppose the wording reproduced from New Idea really does trace back, however indirectly, to the couple or people acting on their behalf. If that is the case, then the fightback was a self-inflicted wound. It took a fringe rumor with no evidence behind it and amplified it, handing the tabloids specificity, internal conflict, a legal subplot, and a financial angle they never had before. Worse, it exposed a contradiction the couple can never fully walk back, because the reassurance describes unity through disagreement and restraint through a man famous for litigation. In this reading, they did the tabloids work for them and revealed their own confusion in the process. Scenario 2. Suppose the reassurance does not reflect Sussex thinking at all. Suppose it is what it literally is, an anonymous account in a magazine, reproduced by a commentator, with no verified link to the couple. If that is the case, then the situation is arguably worse for them, not better. It means outsiders are now writing the script of their marriage and their media strategy, putting words in their mouths, defining their internal disagreements, narrating their finances and their tactics, and there is no authoritative Sussex voice correcting the record. Strangers are drawing the map of their private life, and the couple are just watching it happen. Notice what neither scenario contains. Neither one proves an affair. Neither one confirms a single word of Lady Colin Campbell's original allegation, which remains exactly as unverified as it was the day Closer reported it. The two readings are not about whether the rumor is true. They are about who controls the story, and on that question they converge completely. Whether the reassurance came from inside the tent or from strangers outside it, the result is the same. The Sussexes have lost control of their own narrative. That is the real answer to why this particular rumor became impossible to ignore. It was not the strength of the allegation, because the allegation is weak, thin, and unsupported. It was the reported fightback. The response gave the rumor three things it did not have on its own. Oxygen, because a reaction signals that the target cares. Specificity, because the reassurance introduced concrete new claims about tension, tactics, and money. And a fresh contradiction, because the reassurance argues against itself and against Harry's own record in nearly every line. A vague rumor became a detailed saga, and it did so not through any new evidence, but through the response meant to shut it down. And the ambiguous images that float around these stories, the missing engagement ring on a trip to Jordan that fashion magazine Elle noted, prove nothing at all. A ring worn or not worn is not evidence of infidelity or separation or anything else. It is a blank screen that people project onto once a rumor is already loose. The only reason such an image gains traction is that the story was already given room to breathe, and it was given that room by the fightback, not by the facts. So here is the question worth sitting with. If your goal is genuinely to protect your marriage and your privacy from the tabloid machine, why would you feed that machine the richest meal it has had in months? Why choose fog when you have proven you can choose sunlight? Why reach for an anonymous whisper when a named voice worked before and worked well? The pattern is the answer. This is a couple, or a story being told around a couple, that keeps mistaking noise for control, and every time the noise gets louder, the same instinct kicks in that made it louder in the first place. If you want to see how far that instinct can go, and what happens when the line between private royal matters and public content gets crossed completely, look at the story titled "Meghan Markle Just Crossed the Line That Could Destroy Harry and William for Good." It picks up exactly where this pattern leads, and it shows just how high the cost of that lost control can climb.